Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Andrew Bailey. Must go for the call.
Thank you.
You called out, Mr. Speaker.
I thought the way you were looking at me, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to be talking on the New Zealand Superannuation and Retirement Income Amendment Bill. And it's great to hear members of the opposition supporting this bill because it is actually a good piece of legislation. Just to put it in context, nearly all New Zealanders will have worked and paid taxes over their working lifetime with the prospect of having a prosperous and healthy retirement. And retirement plans are often individual, but in terms of the role of government, there is a principal concern to ensure that every citizen has the comfort of knowing that they will have some income provided to them by government in the form of New Zealand Superannuation Fund. That's why we, as a government, have an obligation to our superannuitants to ensure that the funds are managed efficiently, effectively, and actually in a way that's prudent over the long term. We are focused on ensuring that the government's own finances are appropriate across all sectors that we manage, because not only does that help in terms of building a robust economy, but it also means that there's going to be further money in the future to be able to meet our future commitments to superannuitants. And of course, the end result of all that is that we've got a determination to see more jobs, better incomes, improved standards of living, and continuation of the excellent public services that we all need and require. Now, the purpose of this bill is that it addresses the financial security of our older members of our community. The Superannuation Fund invests money effectively on behalf of all New Zealanders to meet the future requirements of superannuation. By doing so in a good manner, it obviously creates wealth for the Crown's own accounts. It improves the ability of the government to fund national superannuation. And thirdly, it reduces the tax burden on future New Zealanders when we get to the stage where high superannuation payments are going to be required. New Zealand Super is in effect a form of savings for today's taxpayers who ultimately will become the future's superannuitants. Now, in terms of the performance of the New Zealand Superannuation Fund, it's been exceptional. Started in 2003 with a cash injection of $2.5 billion. It has now grown to just on $29 billion and has achieved a staggering return on an average over that period of just over 10%, 10.2%. When you compare this against the fund's long-term objective, which was to beat the Treasury's benchmark of Treasury bill rate by 2.5% over a rolling 20-year period, then this has been an outstanding return. And at $29 billion, the New Zealand Super Fund actually represents close on 40% of all the funds invested, funds under management held by the government. It is a huge part of that industry, huge part of the government holding at 40%. ACC is obviously the next largest component of all that. There's two other funds that contribute that. But it is a huge part of the total assets that the government has. And of course, whereas infrastructure such as schools and roading and things like that, projects like that, whilst we're continuing to invest in them, the value of those assets are not significantly increasing. The importance of the funds management industry, and particularly the place that New Zealand Super plays in that, is that that is always going to be a growing asset class for this government in terms of the future net assets of this for the Crown accounts. Now, this robust result that the New Zealand Superannuation has achieved is due to principally to the Guardians of New Zealand Superannuation, currently chaired by Gavin Walker, and of course the management and leadership team led by Adrian Orr at New Zealand Super. They have achieved a sterling result. And given the size of this fund, just on $29 million as I said, it has been absolutely necessary to have a diversification that, in terms of not only asset class, but also the geographical mix of investments. So it's interesting to note that at 31 March 2015, in terms of the asset class breakdown, just on 60% was invested in global equities, i.e. in a range of international equity markets around the world. 12% was in fixed interest type investments, so things such as bonds, treasury stocks, all those sorts of things, often with a geographical separation as well. 5% in property, 4% in forestry, and it's interesting, one of the things that's been fascinating to watch with the evolution of New Zealand Super is the different types of investments they're prepared to undertake. In terms of the forestry, the investment that the New Zealand Super made alongside other partners in the Central North Island forest. So here we see them taking strategic roles. In terms of geographical diversification, nearly 40% is actually invested in North America. The next highest is 25% in Europe, and interesting, third on the list is actually New Zealand at 15%, followed by 9% in Australia. Now, you might ask yourself, why only 15% in New Zealand? And the reality is that with a fund size of 29 billion, it would swamp the New Zealand equity market and the bond market. And so that's why the fund is almost absolutely obligated to diversify both in asset class, but also probably more importantly in geographical terms. And so it's interesting that types of investments that the company has made in New Zealand, they're many of the top companies and primarily in the listed market area. But this fund is recognised not only as one of the best structured funds, sovereign wealth funds in the world, but it was also named the most innovative sovereign wealth fund by CIO magazine in 2012. Now, just turning to the purpose of this bill, the primary purpose is to facilitate the efficient and effective investment of the New Zealand Superannuation Fund by allowing the guardians, who are the managers and administrators of the fund, to control entities formed for the purpose of holding, facilitating and managing its investments, commonly referred to as fund investment vehicles, FIVs. Now, another way of describing those effectively is holding companies for a range of investments that funds take, and New Zealand Super is not unusual in terms of using these vehicles. Now, these FIVs, these vehicles, can be used as investing entities, i.e. such as a holding company, for taking equity stakes in a range of investments, as well as other investment funds. They can be used for internally or investing in internally or externally managed funds, again with a view around equity stakes, debts or debt, investing equities for real estate. And when you look at New Zealand's investments that the fund has made, by far, as I said before, a lot of them have been in the major stocks, but the biggest holding we've got is actually 20% in Z Energy. And this is where the New Zealand Fund, Superannuation Fund, took a very strategic view and invested alongside other partners in that venture as a private company and listed that entity and made a substantial amount of money on that investment. But that, in terms of controlling interest, that's the highest one that we have at 20%. Typically, the fund invests less than 20% in a range of investee companies around the world. But allowing their guardians to control the FIVs will permit them to structure and access investments more efficiently and will also protect them from liability. And it should be recognised that the guardians are actually a Crown entity. And at the moment, the legislation prevents the guardians from having control of an entity, which at the time of the establishment of New Zealand Super was a good idea, but with the migration and the scale of New Zealand Super as it now is, it is appropriate that the guardians be given this flexibility concerning efficient investment strategies and structures and access. So the key parts they're going to do, make changes around this bill, is to enable the guardians to have the ability to grant a power to appoint a power of attorney, to appoint an investment manager, and to appoint a custodian. Those are very, very relevant and appropriate vehicles that all fund managers use. Thank you very much.
The next call is a split call. Emily